Coming now to the agenda, what will you expect? What can you expect from today? Well, we will have a short introduction on civil society and local actors in the Danube region. Of course, we want to also to see and also to show you where we come from when we talk about civil society and local actors and funding opportunities for them. So that's just so you know what are the initial thoughts, what are the considerations, how we structured potential funding opportunities. Then we will have a quite intense session on EU programs, as you can see. So we foresee most of the part of this today's webinar on EU programs, but we want also to provide you actually an overview of other funding opportunities that are maybe less recognized so far, particularly in the Danube region, such as development cooperation and foundations. Since you can see that these parts could be actually webinars for them themselves, we want just to give you a short glimpse into the topic and then see if we can maybe elaborate at a different session, at a different webinar more on this if you are interested. And of course, we want also to give you a short overview on supporting tools. So it's not just about funding, it will be also a short insight. I want also to give you some short insights on, well, maybe other things regarding or other aspects regarding transnational project development. So the aim for today is to provide a rough overview. So also the list of funding opportunities that we present today won't be exhaustive, but it should just give you a short overview on different directions, the different instruments that are around. So starting now. With civil society and local actors in the Danube region. So, well, what are we talking about when we talk about civil society and local actors? Because in the end, there are a lot of definitions, a lot of identifications, and we want to see how we approached the question of what could be suitable funding for civil society organizations and local actors. So, the reason why we think that it is very important to share some knowledge on funding and to make regional development more inclusive for civil society and local actors is because both stakeholder groups, civil society organizations, as well as local actors are key players for regional development. They ensure bottom-up perspective of regional development since they are working on the ground, so to say. They are key players, as I said, for inclusive regional development, because it's not just the nation states, it's not just the national level or the European level, but they are also a vital part for regional development. These stakeholder groups make sure that policies and projects that are implemented are actually for the citizens and for citizens at local level, for all kinds of stakeholder groups within society. And civil society organizations and local actors are key implementers of European policies. So that's not just EU policy, but European policies at large, meaning that the national or international strategies need to be implemented on the ground with concrete initiatives, concrete policies that are tailor-made for the needs of citizens and people in Europe. And of course, since we're also having a lot of conversation about the actually next multi-annual financial framework, where one of the policy objectives is bringing Europe closer to citizens, we think that this is also still valid, or also valid actually for the current funding period, actually, because this means that civil society and local actors are the ones bringing Europe and the Danube region closer to the citizens. So we thought, okay, what are the key functions? What are the needs maybe for civil society and local actors? Well, and then we came across the different definitions, but we think what we came up was that when we talk about civil society organizations, we see that they fulfill a couple of different roles. Different roles in terms of advocacy, meaning that they might represent minorities and minority needs within the mainstream society, or they are actually aiming at building communities and being more inclusive and push forward inclusiveness in Europe and in the Danube region. And in terms of the function, it's also relevant whether they are part of service delivery or whether they have a more or less watchdog function. And I think that these categories are also define what might be funding needs, what might be interesting funding sources, because, for example, service delivery organizations that are active in service delivery might have sufficient funding from public authorities, because they are helping public authorities to carry out their functions. At the same time, watchdog civil society organizations carrying out a watchdog function clearly have more problems maybe accessing funding from public authorities, but might need to keep their independency and might need to look for different funding sources. So this is about civil society organizations and some initial thoughts about that. And then we come to local actors, and there we talk a lot about or think a lot about cities and municipalities, but local actors are, of course, much more. Could be also, of course, research institutions, agencies for regional development, and other stakeholders. But they are clearly also active in local policy making and strategic planning, and of course, very importantly, need to deliver services, deliver public services. So this is also some consideration that we need to make. What are the needs for local actors who need to develop local strategies and local planning, who need to engage maybe other stakeholders, or improve their services, or develop new services and be more innovative in terms of meeting the needs of the addressees of their services and their policies. So this is actually what we came also across, and this is also some of the conclusions made from the monitoring for civil society organizations from the Erste Group Foundation that was published in 2019, and this is also available on the PA10 website. So the thoughts that some civil society organizations might have is, well, when they look for funding, should they go for government funding? Should they go to project funding and programs, different programs, which could also lead to different negative outcomes in a way, which means, too much government funding might mean a government bias, which is particularly difficult for civil society organizations which have a sort of watchdog function or need to represent minorities. At the same time, hopping from one project to another might mean that the organization might suffer under a mission drift, where the initial mission of a civil society organization might vary according to the project that they receive through project applications. At the same time, local and regional administrations often also have they have actually public funding. They have access to public funding, but at the same time, they need to be also innovative. So public funding might cover some basic services, some basic tasks, but of course, when it comes to testing innovative structures, testing innovative services, or also testing innovative methods for policy making, for policy planning, or just service implementation, then citizen municipalities may lack the sufficient funding and the sufficient means to finance these actions and tasks. So there is clearly a need to diversify funding. And this again means also looking at the funding landscape. So what we experience what we experienced so far was that when we talk with different cities, municipalities, or civil society organizations, then we might see that a lot of the stakeholders focus on one or two program strands, and try to find ways how to get their project ideas in this funding regime. And this works maybe for some people, for some institutions most of the time, but sometimes you just realize that either the calls are closed or your project idea just won't fit into this one program that you have maybe more expertise. So the funding landscape that we are mostly looking at is quite narrow, while it's actually much wider. And it's not just when we talk about EU programs, where we mostly deal with in the context of the Danube strategy and with regional development. We first and foremost look at cohesion policy programs on the European structural and investment funds, because these are those funds that have spatial relation, who have a focus on regional development. But of course, there are many more funding opportunities out there, and we just need to see which one might work for us. So here we have a rough overview of what are actually more or less what are possible funding sources. So, okay, we have the EU programs. I think that this is something that we mostly look at when we talk about programs and funding, and we usually, in our context, we usually talk about EU programs. But of course, there are also other funding sources, such as development cooperation at EU level, but also, of course, at national level. We have public and private foundations that support particular civil society organizations in different causes. We have international funding programs, such as from the IMF, the United Nations. So there are also different international organizations providing funding, partly for cities and municipalities, partly for civil society organizations. We have, of course, national funding, and of course also many other different funding possibilities of alternative funding solutions, such as crowdfunding, for example, or social entrepreneurship. At this point, or for today's webinar, we mainly focus on the funding opportunities in the first row. So it's about EU programs, development cooperation, and a bit about public and private foundations. And for now, we're just leaving the international funding, national funding, and of course also other alternative funding sources for a later session, maybe. So when we present the programs or the funding sources that today, we want to do this also through a specific lens. We want to see who are actually these programs for. And so we came up with a couple of categories that we would like to apply, which is, first of all, and also quite important, the accessibility in terms of geographic considerations. So it's about the EU membership status. It's are these funding sources accessible for EU members? Are they accessible for non-EU members, or both? We're coming to the type of organization. Is it for local or regional authorities, or mainly public authorities? Is it for civil society organizations, or both? Of course, and also we're looking at the size of organization that is required in terms of staff and budgets. Are these huge projects or big initiatives that require big organizations with a lot of staff, and also access to some budgets for pre-financing or also co-financing? Or is it also, or are these programs more suitable for small organizations? Because it's about small-scale projects, about small budgets, and just maybe for knowledge exchange or minor initiatives that can be also handled by small organizations. The other category is knowledge and capacity. So does the projects or programs require high capacities from the project partners? Does it mean that they need to have some level of professionalism in transnational cooperation and transnational project management? Do they have already the bureaucratic structures behind to implement the project and to deal with this program? Or is it possible to access these programs and funding sources with rather low capacity? So this is also about, is it maybe a good entry point for some stakeholders to just start to transnational cooperation or start to project management? And then last but not least, we have the types of project that can be funded, that can be financed with these programs. Is it about knowledge exchange? Is it about capacity building, project preparation, and of course, or do we deal here with actual project implementation? So these are some initial thoughts that we had prior to looking at some of the projects and programs that we want to present today. And so let's start with the EU programs. And I give the floor, if I can say so, to Martin.
The microphone. So thank you very much, Claudia. I'll just move the laptop a little bit. And also I would like to welcome everybody from my side. I'm working for Euro Vienna. It's an affiliated entity of the city of Vienna, and we are supporting PA10 in this webinar. And as you can hear from my voice, probably fitting to the season, I caught a cold recently, so please accept my apologies for suddenly sneezing or other things connected to this, but I hope you will not hear too much from me. So, but let's move into the content, European programs, and here is the first slide, just to give you a first impression about the size of the topic of European funding programs. This is just the first part of a very, very long list. As we are also running a database, you will hear later about it. We have now approximately 450 funding programs in this database system. And of course, we cannot cover all of them today. And of course, not each of these programs are equally important, especially not for this kind of webinar, which should serve as an introduction to the most important programs for your stakeholders and or for yourself. And that's why we chose to focus on the most important ones for the Danube region, of course, on one hand, but also to the larger ones, I would say. And here you can see the list is already a little bit shorter. It will be a little bit longer during the presentation, but this you get an impression where we are focusing on which programs. And of course, you also have the picture of the Danube region, which you are, I'm sure, aware of. So we try to cover this area most of the time. This does not mean that most of the programs are also valid for other regions, but we have this focus. Regarding, before I go to the first one, to the Interreg, just a very, very short introduction regarding the time scale of these funding programs. Almost all of these funding programs have a duration of 7 years. It's decided by the European Commission, by the European Union on a high level. And we are now in this funding period starting at 2014 and ending next year, 2020. So the next funding period will start in 2021 and will end in 2027. What I wanted to emphasize here is that, of course, we are coming to an end of this period, and we are focusing on this period during this webinar only. This was we decided on that because most of these programs will continue. Almost all will continue in one way or the other, and the focus will stay similar. Of course, there will be differences, but these subtle differences are not yet decided. The budget is not yet decided for the next funding period on most of these programs, so we decided not to present you something which will change in the future. But I wanted to mention it and to inform you that it may be useful to also follow the news coming in a couple of next months regarding the programs. If you find one program which you're interested in, you can lay your focus on it and see how is the programming for the next period coming on, and when will be the first call, things like this, and what is happening regarding the budget. But that's enough just for the introduction. The first funding program I wanted to focus on is Interreg, and I mentioned before that we have approximately 450 funding programs in our database. If this sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, but if you, for example, look at Interreg covers already approximately 100 of these funding programs, because Interreg is divided into different sub-programs, so to say. And on the highest level, so to say, what is valid for all of the Interreg programs, you can see here, first of all, the basic facts. It's funded by the European Regional Development Fund, the ERDF. It aims at the European territorial cooperation, so it is important that this program is seen as something to improve the cooperation of the various regions and territories in the European Union, and to motivate them to work together to overcome borders, for example. And there are different strands. With strands in this program, we mean different levels, I would say, of cooperation. I'll come to that in a couple of minutes. And to see just what is the topic-wise focus of Interreg, you can see here the 11 investment priorities. They are quite general formulated. For example, research and innovation is a quite vast field, but it gives you a hint. If you have some idea, if you have some project that could fit into this, okay, it's worth it going deeper into it, looking for calls and deciding, yes, this Interreg fits or it fits not. But I've talked about the different strands, and so the different sizes of the Interreg programs, and just explanation why we have the figure 5 after Interreg. It's the fifth iteration, so it's the fifth funding period in these Interreg programs. So Interreg A is the cross-border cooperation. So it's between two countries, for example, and we have here an example also listed between Slovakia and Hungary. And this means we want smaller projects here, and we are asking for at least 2 different countries with a little bit more than just 2 partners, but that's the focus. Then we have, of course, the Interreg B, which is moving to a little bit larger size. And this, for example, most of you know under the name of the Interreg Danube Transnational Program. And here we have a cooperation not only between 2 countries, but also it can be, we participated, for example, in a DTP project with 6-7 countries, depending how you count the ESPs, but never mind. So it's a larger partnership of countries. No worries. I think we have here some technical issues, but I try to ignore the technical details and continue with my presentation. And of course, then we have also the Interreg C, which is called interregional cooperation. So you see the definitions are quite subtle as well: transnational cooperation, interregional cooperation. But interregional means that we are not focusing on one macro region, for example, like the Danube region, but we are focusing on additional. So we overcome these regions. And URBECT is an example, and Interreg Europe is also an example where you have countries participating which are not present in one macro region only, for example. This is just to explain the different strands. So how to find the right Interreg program. I mentioned a couple of times already our own database, the Euro-Access macro region database. We will have a very short presentation at the end of today's webinar, how to use it, where to find it, just that you heard it here. So you can use a database, this database, for example, to find an Interreg program which fits to you, fits for your idea. But you also have a very nice tool from interreg.eu. This is a website where you can identify yourself on your NUTS 3 level, for example, even not only on a country level. And then you can see which Interreg sub-programs. So of all of the strands I mentioned before, you are eligible to submit your idea. So this is quite useful. And we mentioned that we will disseminate the slides, and then you will also have the links. So, of course, summarizing Interreg, as having presented it here, with these three different sizes, it's quite difficult. So this slide can just be a very general summary, but we have represented here all of the sizes of the projects you can imagine. It can be very small projects with small funding, and for small organizations with small budgets, for the Interreg CBC, so the Strand A, for example, program. But you can also have programs where you submit your ideas, like on Strand B or C, where you need a lot of time to prepare the proposals and to find put a lot of effort into finding your partners and all these kind of issues which have to be considered. Regarding the membership, you may come from a new member or a non-EU member. The details are listed in our database or in the Interreg calls websites. And regarding the type of organizations, of course, we have to focus on local and regional authorities and civil society organizations today. So both are eligible in these Interreg calls. There may be, of course, as I mentioned, there are 100 different sub-programs. There may be, of course, limitations in one or the other, but yeah, it's just an overview and a general summary. So you have to find these details yourself when you go into the call. But most of the time, it's easily to find. Yes, and regarding the type of the project, it's mainly, I would summarize, as for the implementation of some concrete project idea. Sometimes they also fund the preparation of certain project, but yeah, it's a summary, as I mentioned. So this concludes my short overview about Interreg. And I would like to give back just for this topic to Claudia, because there is some speciality in the Interreg.
Yes, right. So actually, what you heard now from the Interreg strands is that, yeah, since we are quite at the end of this funding period, there are not a lot of open calls anymore that you can expect. So but still, there might be one or the other, particularly in the cross-border cooperation, and it's worth maybe having a look at how it works, and there will be definitely Interreg programs in the next funding period. But what I'm also want to mention here, and there is another call to go, is something quite exotic. It's the Interreg Danube Transnational Program Seed Money Facility. We had already one call, and a second is yet to come. So what is the seed money facility for? It's for project development of complex strategic transnational projects. It's also the seed money facility is also closely linked to the Danube strategy, meaning that project applicants need to get in touch with the priority area coordinators or with steering group members of the EU strategy for the Danube region, and submitting their project ideas to them, and they will forward these project ideas to the Joint Secretariat. The seed money facility is a facility, as I said, for the development of a project idea, for the development or mature a project idea that is ready to be submitted to EU fund, or actually to funding, to further funding sources, which means that once the seed money facility funds the development of a project idea for 1 year, it needs to be transnational, and after the project development, it can be submitted for application to any national program, mainstream EU program, transnational or cross-border program, or also to some public or private investors. So there are no limits, basically no limits to submit the project idea for any other funding. So you don't need to develop a project idea only for Interreg or only for EASY funding. The total budget per project will be 50,000 euros, which consists of already of the 85% EU contribution, and the rest is the 50% national co-financing. As you can see, the seed money facility is also available for all eligible stakeholders from the countries that are part of the Danube Transnational Program, which is actually the same geographical area as the Danube strategy. And there is a next call expected to be launched in the second half of 2020. So the monitoring committee in the Danube Transnational Program is still deciding on the details for the calls. So also when it comes to the final launch of the call, or to the final decision for the call and the launch of the call, all the information for the application will be published, and also not only by the program but also by the Danube strategy. So who is this one for? So who should apply or should consider applying for the seed money facility? So as I said, the seed money facility covers all the member states all the partner states of the Interreg Danube Transnational Program, which includes EU members and non-EU members. It also covers the same eligible partners as the whole Danube Transnational Program, which also includes local and regional authorities and civil society organizations. When it comes to the size of organization, we would recommend that this is maybe rather something for smaller organizations, since we think that bigger organizations might organize the development of project ideas in a different manner, and then maybe have their own funds and their own financing for these kind of project preparations. In terms of knowledge and capacity, we would say, well, since the same or more or less the similar rules apply to the implementation of this seed money facility projects compared to the usual Interreg projects, we would say that it wouldn't hurt if you have already quite some capacities in terms of how to implement these sort of Interreg projects. But I think at this point, it can also be a good chance for organizations and authorities with low capacities to actually build their capacities in preparation to a bigger project implementation and project application. So I think the seed money facility can also have the opportunity, or also offer the opportunity for low capacity organizations and institutions to build their capacities within the seed money facility project. And the types of project is, well, it's of course a project preparation facility. So therefore, of course, it funds the project preparation, the development of a project for further implementation. But as I said, it's also a possibility to build capacities for transnational project management, to build capacities in terms of knowledge of funding landscapes, because this will be also one component of the seed money facility, that you also look and do some research on what could be suitable funding sources for your project idea once you have developed it within the seed money facility. So now we move to the next. So as we can see, there are no questions so far to the Interreg regime or to the Interreg programs. So I would say that we move forward to the next one.
Okay, thank you. So as you can see on your screen, it's Erasmus Plus, and most of you will be familiar with the term Erasmus, as it's a student exchange program, but I also included it in our webinar today because I think it can be used for something else, which probably not everybody of you know or are aware of. Let's move into it. So, of course, it's the EU program for education, training, youth, and sport. And perhaps also this is not well known that this can be used for sport topics, issues. So, within this program, you have more or less three different kind of I would call it strands or like funding activities, but three different types of project activities. So it's mobility exchanges. This is what most of us know when we hear about Erasmus. It's the exchange for students and young people. It can be also vocational training for students and apprentices, but also for teachers and youth teachers, university professors as well. Then we have cooperation projects. This is the interesting thing for today, I guess. You can, within Erasmus, set up a project, a cooperation project, to develop, transfer, and implement education, training, and use practices. But it has somehow, should have an effect on employment and entrepreneurship. But yes, this is just on the very high level recommendation. And of course, you can also do some sport-related activities, sport events, or related partnerships here. Sorry. For the activity one, key activity one, the student exchange, I would not like to go into detail because it's well known, it's well adopted by universities, for example, and it's well used. And it's probably also not the focus for today, but key action 2, for example, is for cooperation, for innovation, and the exchange of good practices. And in the key action 3, both of these, let me just go back once, fits into the second part, the cooperation project, so that's where it belongs to. And you have here the support for policy reform, for example, a youth dialogue project, which you can build your project idea around it. So this could be interesting for the most of you. When I look a little bit deeper into key action 2, like I said, cooperation for innovation and the exchange of good practices, there are different possibilities on how to structure or how to submit into a call. Strategic partnerships is one, sector skill alliances, and capacity building in the field of the youth. The other two, the knowledge alliances, they are just dedicated for European universities. I leave that out for today. And the capacity building in the field of higher education, I leave it out as well, because it's, again, for universities or universities of applied sciences, for example. In any case, higher education. So what you can see here, these strategic partnerships in the field of education, training, and youth. It's very general, but you can use it to, if you do something for education, if you train young people, if you are active in this field, you can find partners and set up a strategic partnership and develop your own idea. And it is a mixture of a pilot activity which can be done there, and also a planning which you should use, a planning possibility. As an example, of course, you have to do something here, like I said, a pilot activity, but you can use the meetings within this project to come together with the other partners, which you have hopefully selected in a way that you can use it in the future as well, and develop something out of it. So you first do a pilot, and then developing the pilot further, you can use the project meetings, for example, to prepare another proposal for the future activities. So for another program, for example. So it has to be said that Erasmus Plus is of course not developed for that, and of course this cannot be the main activity. This should not be understood here in this way, but it can be used in this way. And another thing with Erasmus Plus is that you don't get a lot of funding for it. Most of the time you get a fixed budget for a meeting, for example, a fixed budget for a small conference, a fixed budget for traveling to a certain city. This is all laid out in the detailed call information. But at least it is something where you can try out your idea and develop it a little bit further. And this is as well possible in the sector skill alliances and in the capacity building in the field of use. These are just the main high-level topics. On these topics you can find further calls where you can find to submit your project idea. And looking a little bit into these strategic partnerships, you also have to take care of the horizontal principles which have to be tackled. So there has to be at least one, but it's always better when you cover more than one, of course. For example, social inclusion. We participated recently in a project where we had the goal to reach migrants, for example. So people who are not included in the social way of a city, for example. And here you can find this horizontal principle which you have to tackle in your idea. But it can be also another one, like environmental and climate goals have to be considered as well. So it's very general, but just that you heard of it. Then when you look at the eligible organizations, for example, this is quite narrow. Of course, enterprises can also take part, but it's more dedicated to non-profit organizations, non-governmental organizations, higher education, public body. So there has to be a focus on this education topic, vocation education topic a little bit. Partnerships, like I mentioned, depending on the different programs, 2 to 3 minimum partnerships, but from again 2 or 3 different program countries. The duration can be something between 6 and 36 months, and the budget, as I said, it's a total budget for all the project partners can be up to 450,000, and there is the contribution of this. This is fixed. And we have a funding, it's a little bit different than other programs. The funding funding rate of how much you will get reimbursed varies from 75% to 100% depending on the activity. So for example, for organizing a small conference where you have fixed rate of 1,000 euros, you will just get 75%, 75% out of it. For reimbursement of travel costs, it may be different, a different percentage, but this is just that you get an impression. Depending on the activity within the project, you get different funding rates. Regarding when to apply, this is I think also a different thing compared to the other programs. There are fixed, more or less fixed dates each year, and we have it in 5th of February, 30th of April, and 1st of October. So there's less stress for submitting your Erasmus Plus project than in other programs where you have fixed deadlines for one topic only. So I mentioned the sector skill alliances, but I will not go into detail as we will send you the slides. You will see it's similar, but of course differences in the details.
Yeah.
Yes. I also skipped the following ones because we're quite a little bit over the time already. But as I presented the first one, I'm sure you will find your way around these as well. So just an overview of who is it for, as it is a quite big topic and a quite big program. EU members and non-EU members, especially in the Danube region, Serbia, are eligible. Other countries, like for example Turkey, are as well eligible. They are also members of Erasmus+. Local and regional authorities and civil society organizations can apply if there is a focus on this education topic, vocation topic. And regarding the need for resources to submit a proposal, I would more go into the small organizations symbol here. It's not that difficult. The proposal is not that vast and not that big, but yeah, you don't need a lot of staff and budget to prepare it. And regarding the knowledge and capacities, it's for both, depending on the topic. And the type of project, it's for capacity building mainly, but as I mentioned, you can find your way around to use it for project preparation as well, even if it's not quite official build on that. Yes. Okay. You want to say something? No, that's fine. So then let's move on to LEADER, which is also something which may be interesting for some of you. This is also a little bit different animal, I would say, compared to the most of the EU programs. First of all, it's funded by the European Agricultural Fund for Rural Development, and it's a bottom-up funding program. So there is not a one entity on the European level or even on the national level deciding about the funding needs or funding topics, but it has to be set up on a local regional level. You do it in a way that there is the limitation. The municipalities have to form a local action group, LAG, and it has to do something for the region from these municipalities. if the municipalities have formed this group, it becomes a legal status. It can or has to include, it has to include civil society organizations, and it has to define a local development strategy. And this is quite interesting because this local development strategy describes what kind of projects will be funded by this small program, which has been formed for the next 7 years. That's quite interesting. So it can be decided on local level what is important for the local region. That's the main issue. And content is also quite vast. Of course, there has to be the focus regarding the region, the development of the region, on the economic, ecological, social, and cultural aspects of the region, of the rural living, like it said, and the regional development. So if you are a municipality, or if you have a good connection to these, you can suggest this, or you can even initiate it and set it up in your region. And excuse me, if you are not a municipality, you can also see if you are in a leader region on one hand, and find what kind of projects are funded in your leader region. And I put the link into our presentation here. There's a database. You can find the countries, you can find the regions, and then you see what kind of projects are already ongoing and which have been formed by these local action groups. Who is it for? As I mentioned it, okay, it's limited to EU members. Then the type of organization forming the local action group and forming the local funding program, so to say, has to be a local or regional authority. And if you look at the funding projects which will be funded, it is for small organizations. Other type of organizations, of course, can apply. This is for enterprises, for civil societies. It's fits for everybody who is active on a local level. And knowledge and capacities, well, to form, again, it's twofold. To form the local action group, you need high capacities, but to submit for a leader project, it's not that high. And type of project, on the project level, it's for the implementation of local projects. I guess that's it. Let me just see. Okay, we have one question regarding LEADER. How important is the role of local agencies to decide about funding, or is the EU in Brussels deciding?
Yeah, well, I think the role of local agencies or local authorities is crucial here, because the whole funding is based on these, as we mentioned, on these local action groups. So it's community-led local the so-called community-led local development that actually defines the way forward and the funding information, or the not funding information, but the funding purpose. So this means, and this is also, I think this is actually a good question in this regard, because since there will most probably be another LEADER program or something like that in the next funding period, that means that it's also already a good time to think about building capacities and think about this, how to formulate, how to start with this community-led local development, or are there any further capacities required? Are you actually living in a region that is already a leader region, or do you want to start with this process? And then I think this is now a good, also in preparation of planning for the next funding period, this is also already a good opportunity and a good time to think about how to go forward in the next funding period.
Yes, so it has to be understood that it's coming from the region. So the local agencies, as they have been mentioned here, are very important to not influence, but lead a little bit the way for the local municipalities, probably on the decision what is necessary and needed for the region. So then let's move on to Europe for Citizens, another one of the large EU programs. And it's the main goal, the main objective is bringing the European Union, closer to the citizens, of course, and this should be done with two different ideas: to contribute to the citizens' understanding of the Union, its history and diversity. are to foster the European citizenship and to improve conditions for civic and democratic participation at union level. So, for example, contributing to the citizens' understanding of the European Union. One example could be to find the common or the common roots of some kind of history over the borders of the states, for example, between Austria, Hungary, for example, Austria, Czech Republic, and so on, but also on in the different areas and different sizes of the regions. And the second one, to foster the European citizenship, is just to build on the European values and define something which can be understood as European citizenship, and not only the national citizenships, but also European understanding of living, and then again the involvement of everybody, of us, in the civic and democratic process of the European Union. That's very nice words, I can understand that. But regarding the program, you have three different strands, more or less. The European remembrance, which a little bit contributes to the first sentence I mentioned before. Then the democratic engagement and civic participation. That's the second one. And the operating grants, which are decided on certain topics, what will be funded there. I'll come to that. So let's move to the next one. European remembrance. What is the aim? To involve citizens from different target groups to build on the European Union citizenship, like that we are one people in the European Union. The activities can be research activities, exhibitions can be formed. It's quite understandable how exhibitions can contribute to that. Public debates, of course. The non-formal education is quite important. And these European Remembrance projects are quite small. So we have here 100,000 euro grant or maximum grant for these kind of activities. And the duration is also limited to 18 months per project. The partners are public, can be public, regional, local organizations, bodies, non-profit organizations, of course, research organizations, civil society organizations, but also associations of so-called twin towns, cities going together and working together. And the partnership has to come at least, that's also different a little bit from other programs, from just one member state. So there can be national projects, so to say, only, but as I put it here in brackets, the transnational projects are favored from the program. This is also understandable why it is. Talking here about cross-border activities. The democratic engagement and civic participation. What is the aim? Civic participation, of course, focusing on the European Union policies, as I mentioned before. The activities can be initiatives for mutual understanding, intercultural learning, solidarity, societal engagement, and of course also the topics of migration can be tackled here, because there are a lot of projects in the past have been funded with this side topic. And regarding the project duration, we have a different thing, because it's a one-kind activity. It's 21 days. Can be got, if you look at sound twinning, so it tackles just, or it targets only activities like conferences, for example, workshops. We have the network of towns, which can be 24 months, or the civil society projects, which can be a little bit larger than, a little bit less large, like 18 months. Regarding who can participate, who can be eligible partners, is the public regional bodies again, the NPOs, the civil society organizations, and these twin towns I mentioned before. We have budget between 25,000 and 150,000 euros. You see also that the budget is not that high like in other programs. We will see a little bit later on. Operating grants. Here we have a little bit different topic. What is it for? It's raising awareness of European remembrance or encouraging democratic and civic participation. So it's a concrete action like of the two I mentioned before. The activities, permanent, usual, or regular activities of organizations can be funded here. That's also different, because normally regular activities in most of the programs are not funded. You have almost always a focus on innovative new ideas which can be funded, but here we have a different focus. And of course, you have this European outreach, and you have to contribute to the mentioned objectives of the program. The grant types are support for organizations in the form of framework partnerships. So you have to form a partnership with other project partners, sorry. And the duration is maximum of 3 years, a little bit longer than the others. And the eligible partners, again, like in the others, depending on the aim, on the topic, civil society organizations for European remembrance, for example, but also different organizations like European think tanks, which are not tackled by other programs, and platforms for pan-European organizations. Budget, you have approximately 200,000 to 600,000, and you also have a different co-funding rate here between 70% and 90%. So that's, yeah, just to summarize that. I guess there were some questions before I summarize, or afterwards, we do it afterwards, okay. So who is it for? Well, EU members and non-EU members. For the Danube region, we have Montenegro, Serbia, and Bosnia-Herzegovina included. The type of organization for today's webinar, we identified the civil society organizations which are eligible. And regarding staff and budget, I think here we could also put the large organizations. It's not only the small organizations. We have to change that for the slides, which we'll send out. It's, Europe for Citizens is not a project proposal which can be filled out easily. You need staff and budget to prepare this in a good way, that it has chances to be funded. Capacities, high and low capacities are needed or can be tackled here. And the type of project is not only, this is also a mistake, I'm sorry, project preparation, but project implementation, of course. It is even less for project preparation, I would say here.
Yeah, we'll change this all in the presentation. That we once we send it out. Regarding, I also think that since there are town twinning initiatives, that we might add this too. So it's actually even for more things that we displayed here. So yay. So we got another question on the Europe for Citizens program, which is, if the competition is high in this program, and
yes,
actually, yes, it is quite, unfortunately, with a lot of these programs, the competition, it's a quite competitive program, perhaps it could be interesting for the other programs as well to answer the question regarding the competitiveness. The Erasmus Plus is, of course, competitive, but much less. And it's much easier, also because you use less effort to prepare a proposal. It's better to start with an Erasmus project, I would say. And yes. Interreg is different regarding the strands, of course. On the local level, it can be also quite difficult, but much easier than on the transnational level. I guess with the CBC programs, it's like with a lot of these different strands, the more you can exchange with the managing authorities and the joint secretariats, the more you can also draft your project idea or your project application in a way that it really fits to the program. Of course, when it comes to the Europe for Citizens program, I also would like to mention that there are national contact points. So when you go on the website of the Europe for Citizens program, you can see, you can find your responsible national contact point. And then I would highly recommend, particularly if you don't have any experience with this program so far, to just meet with your national contact point and just see what do you need, how does your project idea fit to the program. Is it a good match? Is it something that you need to take a closer look at? And I think this also, of course, it's still, as we said, it's still competitive, but of course it might increase your chance of applying or submitting a project application that's really fitting, which is an actual match between your project idea and the program.
And let me add something here, because it seems we have just a short content break here, but it's important. The funding database I mentioned already a couple of times, It covers all of the programs, and you also have the links to the original call websites or program websites. So if you need to find, for example, the national contact points for a certain program, you can find it, of course, on the official funding program site. And to find these, because we didn't put the link in here, it's easy to find. If you want to use the database, you can find the link there. So I will present it at the end, and you can see how you find your way to get these additional information. Because it's not hidden somewhere, it's easily accessible actually in the internet. Okay, let's move on. Creative Europe, just a quick overview. It's another big large program. As the name says, it's regarding culture media activities, and it supports the European audiovisual, cultural and creative sector. And we have here the culture projects from the 3 different strands, which can be cooperation projects, literary translations, for example, European platforms and European networks. Then you have the media strand, which is a little bit, all these subtopics here mentioned, they're not much more, but I took out the most important ones to give you a feeling what this strand stands for. Media, for example, has a very strong focus to access to market, promotion of film, online promotion of video productions, for example, but as well video games. But again, economic view, the distribution of these productions, cinema, but also training activities regarding media. And the cross-sectoral is covering both topics, but has a focus on refugee integration in this current funding period and bridging content on the digital level, so to say. To get you an impression how much money is there for the culture cooperation projects, I mentioned you have a quite low funding rate compared to the other programs presented today, between 50 and 60%, but the budget can be something between 200,000 and 2 million. So we're getting to the larger programs now. And of course, larger project means larger scale cooperation and more project partners, which means more work. And eligible partners are organizations, this is important, active in the cultural and creative sectors. It can be limiting for some organizations, but it is like that. And partners have to come from the EU member states, but also the EFTA, so I should say EFTA countries here. And when you look at the media strand, which can perhaps be interesting for some of you when you see it on a festival level, if you want to do a transnational, interregional festival, cinematographic festival, is a lump sum. You get one-time amount, budget between 19,000 and 75,000 euros, and eligible partners are a little bit more, wider area here. We have private companies, non-profit organizations, charities, foundations, municipalities are as well eligible, town councils are mentioned. Yes, and from which countries? EU member states, candidate countries, European neighborhood policies, and much more. Please have a look at the website. It depends on the call which countries are eligible here. And the last one, but probably interesting one, is the cross-sectoral, which has this refugee integration focus in the current funding period. We have here a funding rate of 80%, it's quite large, and the budget between 100 and 200,000 euros. And what can you do within this cross-sectoral strand, so to say? The project content should support refugees and migrants to socialize, for example. You can set up your learning platforms. You can give EU citizens the opportunity to discover the culture of refugees and migrants, for example. But you can also support cultural works, not only of migrants, but has to have a connection here all over Europe. And you find some more content in the call details, but summarizes it. And eligible partners have to come from at least one member state or European Union, but also the project leader and one more partner has to be active in the cultural and creative sectors. But additional partners may be active in relevant sectors such as public, social, healthcare, educational spheres. So it's a little bit broader area which is allowed here. So you can form a good consortium here. And I named mentioned also some of the countries eligible here for our region, Bosnia and Herzegovina, for example, yeah, Serbia, Montenegro, and so on. Iceland and Norway as well, if somebody from Iceland is joining us today. Who is it for? EU member, non-EU member states. I mentioned that already. Civil society organizations. In your point of view, of course, you have to have this connection to a media organization, or you have to be active in this field as well. It's for big and small organizations as well. Creative Europe is, as the question came, of course, also competitive. I would say a little bit less competitive, like the one before. But yeah, don't underestimate the effort here as well. And of course, it's mainly or only for project implementation. Okay, I think we are quite not on time, but it's quite okay. I think we're coming not to an end, but we're coming close to an end. Horizon 2020, a well-known large program for funding everything, more or less. No, it has a focus on research and innovation. This has also a good focus on enterprise, economy, and the current funding rate, which is still running until next year. We have these 3 different topics, more or less, in Horizon, maybe well known to you because it's advertised. It's Horizon 2020 is the most advertised program, I would say. So you have the industrial leadership topic, you have the societal challenges, and the excellence in science. I think we can focus today on the societal challenges a little bit. Leadership, industrial leadership may not be main interest of you, and excellence of science may be interest, but yeah, I think we focus on the societal challenges. You have the topics here: health, democratic change, well-being, food security, sustainable agriculture, secure, clean energy. So it has a lot of topics here. But what are the characteristics, the types of actions, the funding rates? I will tell you now. So Horizon 2020, you can summarize it's challenge-based. So the calls have a certain topic which has to be tackled. You have to approach this topic, to improve this topic, to do something new with this topic. It is very competitive. It's one of the most competitive programs. You have to be very innovative. We all know innovation is a word used almost everywhere, but here they take it very seriously. Your idea how to solve a project has to be something quite new, not done before. So you also will not get your regular work funded in Horizon 2020. And you have an emphasis on this excellence approach, because Horizon has to be the program moving Europe forward regarding the excellence in research. So, for example, this. Then let me just go quickly through the types of actions, because this is quite interesting and different to the other ones. I will not go to all of them, but the first 3: research and innovation action. And I also can tell you the first 3 will be continued, amongst others, in the next funding period. So this will stay the same. The research and innovation actions they have a funding rate of 100%. And you have here the average contribution. So we are talking here in all these between 2 and 5 million euros. So it's quite a lot of money here, which can be received for your project. The duration is something between 36 and 48 months. The innovation action is a little bit less funding rate, 70%, but the same budget. And the coordination and support action has again the 100% funding. So you will get the whole budget you used for activities here, plus a little bit of overhead, which, if I'm not mistaken, is something around 20% at the moment. It's also a flat rate of the eligible budget. So you get money here to do something. Of course, you have to be very competitive, very excellent, very innovative. Regarding the CSA, it is important because there you can also not only, like in the rest of Horizon, do your research or invent something which is very smart, but you can also write or develop your policies, your transnational policies on a certain topic. If you have an energy topic, for example, you can do policy papers on this and create or organize conferences on this topic. So it doesn't have to be research only. That's what I wanted to mention here. Yeah, this is just a very simplified chart from which I took from the FFG homepage. Just what does it mean? Here you have the 25%, you have the indirect cost which you get 100% of your real costs, and then you get 25% overhead as well. We also cover the Horizon calls in our database, but I can suggest the funding and tenders portal from the European Commission has it all. It has all the calls for Horizon 2020 here. So have a look here. And just what is now interesting for the last 2 years, okay, this year is almost over, but next year, this is the status from the beginning of this year. So there were 20 billion euros still available for this and next year, 2 years. There was a focus on the ERC Synergy grant. I will not go into focus here, but you will find the details online. They still are operating the EIC pilot, the Fast Track to Innovation, the FED Open, which is very, very competitive on very new science issues, but also the SME instrument is still running next year, where small and medium-sized enterprises can get funding, very simplified way to develop their business ideas. So this is worth looking at it, perhaps. And the others I will not mention here, even if it's interesting to work with China, Canada, and Australia. And the overall message is that already in preparation for the next Horizon program, Horizon Europe, simplification is going on each year. So it is simpler to submit and it's simpler to get your money back if you received project funding here. So I cannot move on. Yeah. Who is it for? Well, somehow it's explanatory after the presentation. EU member, non-EU member states. For example, you can work together with Israel if you like. It's also included here in the Horizon 2020 project. Local and regional authorities, civil society organizations are eligible. You have to be careful if you're one enterprise unit with just EPU. It's too small most of the time. They are taking care that there is a certain substance and you're operating since a couple of years. There is a large effort for preparing it, and you have to consider a lot of time to find all the details for your consortium. It is for knowledge exchange, it is for capacity building, and it can be used, of course, for project implementation. So this goes for all three of us. Which brings us to the ESF. If there are no questions, no, there are no questions. I don't have any questions. Let's move on. We are 1 hour and 20 minutes in our webinar. The ESF, very short summary only. The European Social Fund, it's quite big. The interesting thing here is that there is not a European-wide organization again, so it is announced and managed on the national and even regional level. The thematic areas are tackling employment and the mobility of employees, fostering social inclusion, fighting poverty, investment in education, training and lifelong learning, and the improvement of institutional capacities, which may sound interesting for you, I guess. And eligible applicants, public organizations and private organizations, but no private persons. Okay. You don't get that much funding here. It's up to 50% funding rate. And to find out more, as it is different, and it is really quite different in each country, you have to go on this website to see who is responsible for the ESF implementation in your country, and then you can find it on the map. And of course, we have it in our database. Who is it for? It's only for European Union members. It's, like I mentioned, amongst others, for the local and regional authorities and the civil society organizations. And it is quite, it is not that competitive and not that difficult to set up, but you need enough resources and stuff to submit it. And it is for high capacity topics, and you can use it for capacity building and of course the project implementation as well. But please have a look at your local website. Yes, please.
Yeah, the reason why we also included the European Social Fund, for example, here is that most of the operational programs, so this is where you get the funding from, are still have some funding, and they're desperate to spend it. So therefore, if you have a project idea, if you are an entity, public or entity or civil society organization active in the field of each of the operational programs in your country. We would highly recommend to have a look and see if your project idea, if your area of experience can be funded through the national programs. Also, for those who are not that familiar with the European Social Fund, is that you should really take a close look at the operational programs. Not all the operational programs cover all the topics that are can be addressed theoretically in the European Social Fund. So there are different focus areas, different priorities, specific objectives that are specifically addressed. At the same time, you also have the opportunity to get in touch with the managing authorities and see, or intermediate bodies, depending on how the ESF is implemented in your country. And you can see the contact persons on the ESF website that we showed you before. And then you can also see if you can get in touch and see how your project idea would fit into the operational program and what you need to implement it. So I see that there is another question.
So the question was if this, the ESF, is recommended for smaller organizations when we are identifying that high capacities are needed. And I would say it lies a little bit on the national implementation, but I would not recommend it only for large organizations, definitely.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I would agree. So of course, that depends also on the type of project and also which role you play. Of course, if you are more or less a lead partner or have a leading part in this project, then maybe you should be a bigger organization, or at least have the bigger capacities here. Definitely, in terms of the staff, of the available budgets, are great. But also small organizations, since the ESF is also dealing a lot with service delivery, we would say that you can get also, for example, small, we have in some countries, the national co-financing will be covered by public authorities. In some countries, the national co-financing can be accessed through other national public organizations who provides national co-financing to organizations, to the relevant organizations, for implementing the project. So I think in this regard, also smaller organizations have the ability to take part in these kind of projects, particularly recommended if you have a strong expertise in a certain field of interest that is implemented in this project. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on quickly to the topic of development cooperation, and I will move on forward to something smaller, but probably interesting for you as well. It's called BASICS.eu, and BASICS stands for Building Administrative Capacities in the Danube Region. And it is something, Austrian-centered, I would say. So we have the focus, or it's funded by an Austrian organization, but the Austrian Development Agency, and it's managed by the Austrian Associations of Cities and Towns and the Public Administration Research Center of these. And what does it do, and why is it interesting for you probably? It provides it provides support for small actions of exchange of knowledge between Austrian entities and partners in the countries of the Western Balkans and the Republic of Moldova. So you can now understand why we mention it here. You need to do something here. You need, and to get the funding, you need an Austrian partner, an Austrian lead partner, so to say. But all activities, or the funded activities, have to happen in one of the countries of the Western Balkans or the Republic of Moldova. Let me give you an example. For example, a couple of years ago, we submitted a small project with Albania, and we made a couple of workshops traveling through the country, meeting representatives of the cities and towns there, and helping them to get their way around the European Union funding programs and funding opportunities. And we are not talking about much money here. It's a couple of €1,000. I think it will be shown on the webpage. But it can be used to get knowledge from Austrian entities to your city, area, region, and yeah, please use it. And of course, you can also have and No, I lost my
My thread, your thread?
my thread. Exactly. You should use it. You need an Austrian partner, as I said, but you should use it to get the information from an Austrian partner. And if you need some contacts in Austria, you can contact Claudia and me, of course, and over the emails. But probably you have already the contacts to Austria and to some entities. And it may also be possible that these entities in Austria do not have the knowledge about these basic funds. So tell them about it and explain them that something like this exists, and they can submit it. And it's quite simple. You don't need to write a long proposal for that. And you see here, that was the budget I tried to find. It's something between 6,000 and 10,000 euro eligibility, but it's a more or less fixed rate, and you get that money and you just do your activity here. And the question, because it fits here, yes, of course, non-governmental organizations exchange could be used for that. The eligible activities are mentioned here as well: expert support of mentoring, workshops, seminars, trainings, report studies, surveys, whatever you can think of. And yeah, you get expert fees. You can also hire experts from both areas, not only Austria but your country. You can pay them fees to get their view into the project, into this activity. So please use it.
Maybe there's maybe one or two things that I want to add here also. That the basic funding is available via calls. So there will be calls published by an implementing body of the basic fund, and then the eligible partners can apply and can submit a project application. These calls also have a thematic limitation. So, for example, but I have to say that this limitation is not too limited. It's not too narrow. So basically, for example, I think the last call or I think the current period for the basic fund is more or less covering or focusing on the sustainable development goals. So I think that there is there are lots of ideas to assign to this funding, but also to see that that there is a sort of thematic focus, we could say, to this funding. Mm-hmm.
Yes, definitely. And it was in the past years, there were 2 calls per year, so that also could be interesting for you. Mm-hmm. Okay, who is it for? Well, again, this is really low capacities. That's definitely. It is for small organizations, but eligible. Large organizations are eligible as well. You can use it for capacity building, and it is intended mainly for knowledge exchange. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. Let's move on to the Norway grants.
Yeah, so let's move up north. This will be actually the last. Today, this will be the last program that we will present in terms of from the field of the area of development cooperation. We are aware that there are lots more. Of programs dealing with the Danube region, but I think that these two are very much addressing and focusing on this area quite a lot. So now we're moving to the Norway grants. I think a lot of you already heard about it. Maybe you are also already well acquainted with this. Nevertheless, we think that the Norway grants are a very crucial funding instrument. I think particularly also for the non-EU member states. I think that this offers a lot of added value. So here you can see also in this graphic the countries that are addressed. There are also national contact points in almost every country, and if there are no contact points located in the very country, there is definitely a contact point for the region that is responsible for you. So there is also a person standing behind and maybe also explaining a bit more how your project idea might fit to the program. Of course, there are different different topics that the program addresses, and you can see them here. It also covers a broad range of topics like research and innovation, environment, social inclusion, youth employment, regional cooperation, justice and home affairs, and of course, very important, civil society participation, good governance, and fundamental rights and freedoms. I think this is also very important when we talk about, civil society organizations that are maybe more in the field of or having a watchdog function again, where you might need to rely on funding and funding possibilities that are not maybe so service delivery oriented or So, and the Norway grants and the development cooperation is also a good opportunity and source to find funding to strengthen civil society, to strengthen participatory governance, and also to build the capacities to engage in these political processes. So the Norway grants, how are they distributed? They are distributed via calls. So whenever a call is open, it will be announced on their website. So when you want to see what are the latest open calls, so you can go to the website, the link is displayed here. And if you, like I am sometimes a bit too lazy or too much to do to just regularly look at the website, there is also, of course, very handy, a newsletter available, so you can register for the newsletter, and the friendly Norwegian people from Norway Grants will send you the latest calls and funding information. And of course, I think also something I would like to mention at this point is that they have a very nice and simple, easy to digestible how to apply step-by-step procedure. They walk you through very easily how to apply for the Norway grant. So this is also, I think, and I think it's very user-friendly from my point of view. So I can just recommend you to check it out and have a look yourself. So who is it for? So EU members can participate, as you can see also in the as you could see in the display of countries, but of course also non-EU members. It's for local authorities, or like for public authorities, for civil society organizations too, of course. It's maybe also rather for smaller organizations and maybe also low capacities. The reason why I say it here, because I guess there is no limitation on the size of organization, but I think that this funding opportunity might provide also a good occasion to build capacities to apply for more complex funding and also to engage in transnational cooperation. So I think this is also something for smaller organizations, smaller public authorities who have maybe some considerations that you can actually, that you should really think about using Norway grants for your purpose. And the types of project is, of course, capacity building, project preparations, and project implementation. So you can have also small projects that you implement through the Norway grants. So this is it so far from the development cooperation as for today. As I said, we know that there are many more possibilities and programs, bilateral ones, of course. If we count that, it's even accelerate. The number is even more increasing. So I can't see any questions so far on this point. I'd say, I hope you're still with us. I hope you didn't faint so far or fell asleep. So yeah, then I think we'll, if there are no further questions to the development cooperation, at this point, we will move on to the next part, which are the foundations. Right. So with the foundations, I just want to say something before, just to also to manage the expectations a bit on this part. We didn't do well. We won't present today the single or each foundation or single foundations here, because we think that there are so many foundations with so many different causes that we want to rather give you, let's say, a glimpse, an idea on how you could look or how you can find a foundation that might be interesting for you, that might fund exactly the cause that you are looking for. And that is just, and also in the geographic area that you are looking for. So this is about that. So it's not about the single foundations and their causes. Also, they are very different in how to apply for funding, what kind of services they provide. And so, but anyway, we want to give you also, because I also understand, because we also understand that if you are not very familiar with getting funding from foundations, I think the first question would be, where do I look for it? So here we are. We picked 3 different networks here, so that are dealing with institutional philanthropy. To be clear here, these 3 networks are, as I said, networks for foundations. So it's actually a service platform for the foundations, not for the beneficiaries or not for the project promoters. So, but what is important here is that all these 3 networks are working with and representing, in a way, European foundations that are active in various fields. And I want to present you these networks a little bit, just to see, if you go to their website, if you engage with these networks, how could you find maybe the foundation that you always looked for. So we're starting with the European Foundation Center, and it's the leading, as they say, the leading platform for philanthropy in Europe. And the EFC has indeed a lot of members. As you can see, they are currently having 256 members, so maybe you might find one or the other interesting foundation here. They are also spread all over Europe, and there are also even a lot of members, a lot of foundations working in cross-border. So this is quite, I think this is quite remarkable, quite interesting. And now, if you have an idea, if you are working in a specific field, you can see that the different foundations are clustered into thematic networks. So you can go and have a look at the different thematic clusters. So it's from arts to culture to disability, diversity and migration, European democracy, environment, of course, sustainable agriculture and food. I think this is also quite interesting for some. Sustainable cities, gender equality, and research. So I think you have a lot of variety in topics, and you can go now to these thematic networks. You have the link here, and you can see, okay, who are the foundations working in these thematic networks. And then you have also the memberships also listed with their membership profiles or the foundation profiles, and of course how you can access them and how you can reach out to them. So I would recommend, if you are maybe want to see what are foundations in my area, working in my thematic field, in my thematic interest, then this could be a good starting point to just scroll around and just have a look at, is there anyone there who might be interesting for me. We have a similar situation or similar structure with the network of European foundations. It's another foundation that's also a service provider more for the foundations. It's not membership based, but they are still clustering a couple of members, a couple of foundations together on specific topics, and they develop these topics further together with the foundations. Nevertheless, they're also working on programs and initiatives to better support their beneficiaries and their cause in the end. So they have a bit more better overview on the thematic clusters. So it's not or let's say not a better overview on thematic clusters, but it's more digestible maybe, because there are 3 main topics: social inclusion, democracy, international development, and it's more or less working with the same principle, that you can just take a look on the website, have a look at the different thematic areas the NEF is working on, and then you can also see what kind of initiatives have been implemented, which foundations have been involved, and is this maybe something that could be interesting for me. So, and last but not least, I'll come to the third foundation network, and this is DAFNE, Donors and Foundations Networks in Europe. So this is another platform, another network of foundations and donor organizations in Europe that exchange on good practice. So again, it's more like a peer group. Nevertheless, also a good source for finding interesting foundations, because they have in this network, the foundations are not listed, I think, according to thematic networks or thematic priorities, but they are listed in which country they are based in. So you can see, you can have a look in each country that you want to find funding for. Or maybe find a suitable foundation, and then you can see, and then you can have a look either, on the country, but also on the also on the foundation, let's say foundation landscape in the very country, which might be of more or less interest, depending on if you just want to see is there actually a very healthy and very striving foundation landscape or not. But nevertheless, you can also see who is the member in this country, and then you get also a profile of this foundation, and you can see, is this interesting for me or not? So I can see another question. Could it be interesting to cooperate with a foundation to get an EU grant for civil society projects? I think generally yes, but it depends. I guess it depends just also on the foundation and on the topics and activities that this foundation is supporting. I am not familiar with any foundations that are just actually funding these kind of activities, meaning that they are giving out grants or funds to develop these kind of EU grants. But of course, if there are, if the foundation is financing networking activities or capacity building activities or knowledge transfer, I think that yes, of course. They could actually support civil society organizations regarding applying for further grants. If you mean that you want to have a foundation as a project partner, that depends actually on the legal personnel and the legal structure of the foundation. If the foundation, if you consider to have a foundation as a project partner in your consortium, for example, that would just depend on the legal structure of the foundation, if this legal structure is eligible with the respective program. Yeah. So
may I add something to that? Because there is a general principle in the, not in the networks probably, I don't know, this you can answer, but in the program, in the EU funding programs, that when you develop something within the project funded by a program, then there is this sustainability issue that you want that after the end of the project, the idea, the content of the developed thing, the pilot should continue to exist or to be developed further. And perhaps this could be one solution if one of these networks also have this sustainability issue or goal, that they could fund a submission, or they would be happy if you continue your work done funded by the network, by the foundation, in another project proposal. So they're also always interested that the work goes on.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. Yeah.
Sorry.
Ah, okay. So now we're actually moving further now with
Quickly.
quickly. We're moving quickly further. So this was so far a little bit a short, yeah, like dipping our toes in the lake of foundations, and maybe this is also something that we can explore in the future. But now we're coming to something different because now we are a bit moving away from the actual funding, from the money, but also maybe on some other aspects. So we're moving more towards other aspects of project development, and now we're coming to our supporting tools. And
And I will keep this really short, but it is you could see it as a reward because you survived such a long time within our webinar. So the first information I want to give you, something for free. It was a project which recently ended, funded by the Interreg Danube Transnational Program, and it was called Excellence in Rescue. You may have heard of it. What we did in this project was develop a curriculum for excellent project management within for the Danube region. Okay, but why could it still be interesting for you? First of all, we developed this thing called Infodesk. There is a website, and interesting enough, I don't see the link here, but never mind. I will send it out after together with the slides. There's a website where you have a knowledge base, first of all, where you can find, for example, online tools for project management, a list, and we tested all of them and gave our recommendations for it. But you also can submit your questions if you have a question in the preparation, in the running of a project, in the submission of a project, whatever, funding issue. So if you're developing a project, running a project, or finalizing a project, you can ask your concrete question, never mind which program it is. We are an online form. It's really simple. You just add your name, email address, and the question you have, and the former consortium, will answer your question and come back to you as soon as possible. And one thing you can use for free, you don't even need to register there, you just use it. And the second thing is, which I consider a little bit of more value for you probably, the content we developed within this project, curriculum, it is available over this website, rested.academy, and it covers EU policies, project design, project management, social innovation, and innovation in the business context. All of these topics, which may be interesting for you, but also are relevant for your future project. And for running a project, you can find here information developed by people who were very experienced in each topic. For example, the Center for Social Innovation tackled or covered the social innovation part. And you have exercises here, you have material where to find information. So it's like a free curriculum, online curriculum you can use. So have a look. If you're interested, you can get the information online for free. The second thing is the database I mentioned throughout the webinar. So just quickly where to find it. It's euro-access.eu. It's quite simple. We started with a database for the Danube region, and now it covers all the macro region, but I can tell you that it covers even more than just the macro regions. We have much more programs in this, and we are covering much more countries than just the 4 macro region mentioned here. It is based on an initiative from the European Union Strategy for the Danube region, PA10, and implemented by Euro Vienna. And it is funded by the European Union and the city of Vienna. And what is it? Like I said, it's an online search tool for your EU funding idea. You can search for programs, you can search for calls, you enter your field of interest, for example. You can also enter your field of origin, your country, for example. Then you get all the calls which are open at the moment or will be open soon. And what we are doing is we collect all this information from the program websites by hand. We summarize them, we put it into this database and make it available for you. We link it with the keywords. It's free of charge. You can use it without registration. You can register, then you get a little bit more information, but the registration doesn't cost anything. So it's just that you can register for a newsletter as well. And like I said, it is for the macro region, and for you it is in the Danube region. It is relevant. It's for all types of organizations. And yeah, please use it, and you get a first feeling, if you never dealt with European funding programs before, how they are structured, how they are formulated, and where to get the information from. And like I said before, we have the link to the original call information as well as to the program information, and there you can move forward as well. Yes, this is just a summary. I will skip that. Then we are coming to the last thing, the keep.eu database. I hand over to Claudia again.
Yeah, so yeah. Okay, so so I go now to the KEEP database, but I think it was also important to let you know about our Euro Access macro-region database, and we can't stress it enough. Please use it because you put a lot of effort in it. I think it's very helpful just to have an overview, not to go to each and single program website. And yeah, I think some self-advertisement doesn't hurt a little bit. We need to do that. So now we're going to from our web database to the one that was developed by the Interact program. The Interact program is also one of the Interreg program, but it's capacity building for programs. And one of their tools that they developed was the KEEP EU database for project-related information. It's basically covering projects from the European Transnational Cooperation. So it's a lot of Interreg, of course, and there is not only Interreg, but there are also projects with macro-regional relation. So a lot of them are still, again, Interreg projects in many cases, but not exclusively. And here it's also first-hand information from the programs. So the managing authorities and joint secretariats hand over or forward the information. Hand over the information to Interact, and in the case of macro-regional strategies, the thematic coordinators send the project information to the KEEP database, and they try to keep it as updated as possible. So what you can see here, you learn mostly about projects in for Interreg, IPA, and from the instrument for pre-accession, and of course cross-border projects and programs from the European Neighbourhood Instrument. And so on the database, you can just click to the and have a look at the countries, and then you can look. You have a geographic search function and also a thematic search function. The reason why we are presenting you this KEEP EU database is that, of course, in a lot of projects or programs, if you have to apply for funding, the programs will ask you, are there any other projects around that already dealt with this issue? Is there always already someone who has implemented a solution for this problem, or has addressed this topic that you want to address with your project idea? And at the same time, if you want to, if you want to develop a project idea, it's also in your own interest to see what has already been done. Is there something that we can have an added value, or where we can add value, where we can benefit from results and outputs that were done in previous projects? Is there something that we can do better? Is there something that we can develop further? Because we don't want to reinvent the wheel all the time. We want to strive, we want to get better, we want to improve. And I think that, that this database can be a good first step to see what's out there, what has been done so far. And also, of course, if you may look for one or the other project partner, this can also be a good first step to see who has competence in this area, who has already worked on this field, who has already gained some experience. And I wouldn't recommend it actually to put together your whole consortium, because you need to have people around you who have the competence and expertise, but also people who you can trust. and therefore I wouldn't put together a whole consortium on just reaching out to people and institutions you never heard before. But I think sometimes if you need someone from a specific country, some organization or institution from a specific country with a certain expertise, or if you just need someone with a certain very specific expertise, I think this is a good start to take a look on who already worked in this on such projects or in this thematic area, and maybe just approach these stakeholders, approach these institutions and organizations, and invite them for an exchange and see if they would be interested in working with you. So what you can see is that there are already people who implemented apparently successfully a project in the thematic area that you are also interested in. Yeah. So
there was one question previously on Euro-Access. Yes, unfortunately, it is in English language only. We have a German version, but it's just focus. It has focus on for Vienna. So yeah, no, sorry, just English.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we're coming now. We're coming now to an end of our overview. Maybe not as short, but at least, we tried to give you a sort of overview on funding and the funding opportunities, the funding landscape, just to see, because there is a huge variety already within EU programs. But we also know that there are, even beyond the EU universe, there are many more funding opportunities, and it is very complicated sometimes, or it takes also a lot of time. It takes time to look for the suitable funding, and once you found suitable funding or potential funding for your cause, then again it needs a lot of capacities just to apply it for the specific funding. And there are different, and the programs are most of the programs are offering some support, be it be it the function of national contact points that provide counseling, be it as info days, for example, the Interreg programs organize information days prior to calls, and there are many other opportunities, also capacity building seminars and or webinars like this, where programs and other institutions try to reach out to potential project promoters. And of course, so this will bring us also to, this brings me also to a different point that I want to address, which is how we move forward from here, because this because after a phase of reflection after today's webinar, we will think again and come back. So it's not the last time you see us here. And we want to, and that's also where we need you, because we want to know what are maybe fields of interest, what are topics that you want us to cover and a bit more in detail. Do you want to know more about development cooperation, more about foundations, or are you interested in innovative funding solutions, such as crowdfunding? And we think, so that's why we also want to get back to you after the seminar and maybe send you a little survey where we just want to know if there's anything that you also want to know from where we could do some research. And of course, we can also always invite guests, so you get the first-hand information. So it's not only us who try to cover,
summarize things,
yes, to summarize things and cover this, so you can also maybe have the opportunity to ask very nasty, detailed questions. So again, that leaves me also with this to repeat again. We will actually do one or the other amendments to this presentation. So where we just insert some of the information that we came across that is missing now in the current slide. But you will, the slide will be available for download, and we will send you the link. to this presentation. Someday, if we manage to install our YouTube channel, the webinar will also be online, so you can also have not only the presentation but also the whole explanation around that. In any way, we'll keep you informed. We hope we'll keep in touch. And well, I think that leaves me just to say goodbye and thank you for staying with us.
Have a nice lunch if you're going to, and hopefully you see us soon.
Well deserved, well-deserved lunch, or grab a cup of coffee.
Exactly.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
bye.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye-bye.